did the trial chamber issue a new decision in the Gbagbo and Goude case?
No. By oral decision issued on 15 January 2019, the chamber had decided by majority, Judge Herrera Carbuccia dissenting, to acquit Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Goude from all charges of crimes against humanity allegedly committed in Côte d'Ivoire in 2010 and 2011. Today, on 16 July 2019, Trial Chamber 1 of the ICC filed the written full reasons for the acquittal of Mr. Laurent Gbagbo and Mr. Charles Goude. Judges have the mandate to bring justice by ensuring the fairness of the proceedings and the full respect of the victim's rights and of the accused's rights, including the presumption of innocence.
What are the reasons behind the chamber's decision to acquit Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Goude?
ICC judges only apply the relevant legal rules and consider submissions and evidence presented before them in the case under their scrutiny. The majority of the chamber considered that the prosecutor failed to submit sufficient evidence to prove the responsibility of Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Goude for the specific incidents under the chamber's scrutiny. As far as the 5 charged incidents are concerned, the majority analyzed the relevant evidence without putting into question the fact that crimes were committed. The majority focused instead on whether it was possible to establish who was criminally responsible for those crimes. Having thoroughly analyzed the evidence, the chamber concluded by majority that the prosecutor failed to demonstrate several core constitutive elements of crimes against humanity as charged. In particular, the existence of the alleged common plan to keep Mr. Gbagbo in power, which included the commission of crimes against civilians, and the existence of the alleged policy to attack a civilian population, and the existence of patterns of violence from which it could be inferred that there was a policy to attack a civilian population. Also that Mr. Gbagbo or Mr. Goude knowingly or intentionally contributed to the commission of the alleged crimes, or that their speeches constituted ordering, soliciting, or inducing such crimes. These are key elements in the crimes as charged by the prosecutor. When they are not demonstrated, the persons charged with such crimes must be acquitted. Thus, the chamber considered by majority that Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Goude's responsibility for the alleged crimes was not adequately supported by evidence. In her dissenting opinion, Judge Herrera Carbuccia found that there is sufficient evidence, if accepted, on which a reasonable trial chamber could convict Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Goude for crimes against humanity of murder, attempted murder, rape, inhuman acts, and persecution committed against the civilian population within the context of the post-election violence in Côte d'Ivoire.
Can the prosecutor appeal this decision?
Yes. The 30 days deadline for appeal will start running from the date of 16 July 2019, by which the written reasoned decision was filed. It would be then for the appeals chamber, composed of 5 other judges, to make a determination on the merits of such appeal.
Does this decision affect the release of Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Goude?
No. On 1st of February 2019, the ICC Appeals Chamber confirmed the decision to release Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Goude following their acquittal, but set conditions to be imposed upon their release to a state willing to accept them on its territory and willing and able to enforce the conditions set by the chamber. Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Goude are not in the ICC detention center. The Appeals Chamber instructed the ICC registrar to identify and enter into arrangements with the states willing to accept Mr. Gbagbo and or Mr. Goude on their territories and enforce the conditions. Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Goude left the ICC detention center consequently, and Mr. Gbagbo was released in Belgium under conditions on the 5th of February 2019. Meanwhile, the registrar has made the appropriate and necessary interim arrangements for Mr. Goude's release with conditions pending the conclusion of agreements with the state.
What will happen to the victims participating in this case?
The Trial Chamber 1 noted the political conflict in the context of the presidential elections, during which several violent incidents took place in Abidjan and in other parts of the country. However, the case under the Chamber's scrutiny was limited to crimes against humanity allegedly committed during 5 specific incidents: a march on the RTI, headquarters between 16 and 19 December 2010, on 25th of February in Yopougon, a women's demonstration in Abobo on 3rd of March 2011, a shelling of a densely populated area in Abobo on 17 March 2011, and on or around 12 April 2011 in Yopougon. The evidence presented by the prosecution was not sufficient, in the majority's view, to find that Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Goude are criminally responsible for the crimes against humanity allegedly committed during these specific incidents. Trial Chamber's decision is without prejudice to national and ICC prosecutors' investigation outside this scope. The prosecutor may appeal this decision. Victims, subject to the appeals chamber decision, may be allowed to continue to participate in the appeals proceedings represented by their lawyers. It would be then for the appeals chamber to make a determination on the merits of the appeal and decide whether the trial chamber's decision to acquit Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Goude is exempt of errors. According to the court's jurisprudence, the ICC can order reparations when accused persons are convicted. However, if the acquittal decision becomes final following the appeals proceedings, that does not prevent the Trust Fund for Victims, which is a separate and independent institution within the Rome Statute system, from considering providing support to the victims under its assistance mandate.